Day 50, America held hostage. I'm Ted Koppel. No, I'm not Ted Koppel. I'm Steve Green, along with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. But gentlemen, it is day 50 of two Americans that we're not supposed to call stranded on the International Space Station. I'm talking about NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams. And their Starliner capsule that has still not been rated safe to fly. And this, as we're taping this on Friday, July 26, it is day 50 of their week-long stay on board the ISS.
That's a long week.
And that's longer than a week, isn't it?
It's that much.
Yeah.
That much longer. Actually, I think it was supposed to be 8 days, but at this point, who's counting? Well, I'm sure they're counting at this point. They'd probably like to get home. And originally, I was going to call this day 523, America Held Hospice, about Jimmy Carter, but there's even less news on that one. But more seriously, the reason I'm doing this story today is NASA held a press conference on Thursday with NASA Commercial Crew Program Chief Steve Stitch, and I thought he'd have some big news today, like, hey, we did all those tests at White Sands. We know what the problem is. We're going to get a schedule to bring these guys home. Or, gosh, we give up. We're going to send Dragon Crew up there and bring them home that way. Instead, we got a whole lot of not much. We're still not supposed to say they're stranded. But, Bill, the big news, I guess, in this conference was kind of buried in technical details. And this is what I wanted to get in with you. And how do I phrase this? They've been doing the tests out in White Sands. Aerojet made the thrusters for the Starliner capsule for Boeing. They subcontracted, and these are proven units. They've been used on other spacecraft before. They've been modified a bit for Boeing and for Starliner. But here's what we learned in the press conference with these tests out in White Sands. The Aerojet Rocketdyne test thruster, similar to those aboard Starliner, has been in storage for 3 years prior to the recent groundwork, experienced severe degradation in its valve system from nitrogen dioxide vapor. Propellant flow was restricted due to bulging in a seal. Engineers also found Teflon stuck in a downstream filter, suggesting erosion in a seal due to bubbling under high temperature, and the behavior of the Starliner thrusters in orbit seems to match what has been going on with these tests at White Sands, New Mexico, here on the ground. And what it looks like is these thrusters, because of all the delays with Starliner, just went past their best by date. Bill, if you are Wilmore or Williams, are you getting on board that thing to come home?
Nah, it'll be fine.
Says the ground-based guy.
Yeah.
Steve Stitch needs to be fired. And I have a larger point than this. He needs to be fired because that vehicle was clearly not spaceworthy when they launched it. They knew they had helium leak issues and they had thruster issues. Launched it anyway, so it was not man rated when it flew. It just wasn't. And so he needs to go for that. But the more important reason that Steve Stitch, director of manned spaceflight for NASA, needs to be fired is because he needs to be fired and he needs to be replaced with nobody. That office needs to disappear. NASA should not be running manned spaceflight. And if the shuttle didn't teach us anything, then that certainly you would think would do it. The Senate launch system, the Artemis mission, all of these things, flying one flight for $4 billion every 3 years, this kind of thing. Whether or not that was ever sustainable, it has been proven through the just the sheer genius and risk-taking of Elon Musk and SpaceX that everything that is not a SpaceX rocket is an obsolete rocket. And so manned spaceflight needs to get out. NASA needs to get out of the manned spaceflight business. Best analogy I ever heard for this, Steve, was to say that the Federal Aviation Administration ran all of the air travel in the United States. Didn't regulate it, ran it. There was one national airline called FAA Airlines. And if there was an FAA Airlines, we'd be traveling from Los Angeles to New York in 4-engined, propeller-driven airplanes traveling at 12,000 feet. The flight would take 13 hours and would cost $6,000 a ticket. That's what would happen if the government ran our civil aviation service. NASA clearly has a role to play, but the role of NASA should be research, Some regulation. There is a case to be made for making sure that rockets aren't launched on a path that, should they explode, they're going to rain debris down on Tampa or whatever. The Chinese launch rockets right next to their villages, and they come down spewing these horrific hyperbolic, or hypergolic, I guess, chemicals that that are deadly poison. So yes, is this thing going to? Is it going to hurt other people? No. Here's our safeguards. Then get out of the way. NASA. This is not widely really understood. During the glory days of NASA that made NASA didn't build the Apollo program. NASA coordinated the building of the Apollo program from a large number of different aerospace suppliers, far more than we have today. It wasn't just Boeing or Lockheed, and it really, in the case of space now, it's just Boeing. They were contracting the command module and service module with North American. Grumman was building the LEM. Boeing built some parts of the booster. IBM did the electronics, and on and on and on. They were a coordination agency, and they had a very specific mission. But over time, it has evolved from a group of engineers and test pilots to a group of mid-level administrators and middle managers who have no vision, no sense of purpose, and who, most importantly, are spending other people's money. The reason things get done so fast at SpaceX, and why changes are implemented so quickly and so efficiently, is because one man is writing a check for that, and he's holding people responsible. And if you've ever seen Elon Musk on a conference call, on a Skype call, firing people, it is like watching a great white shark just go through a school of crippled tuna. It's an ugly, ugly thing to see. He's ruthless. And that's why they work. And finally, as far as the stranded thing goes, the Boeing thing goes, this vehicle needs to be cut loose. I've said this from the beginning, and I can't say it often enough. I don't want anybody hurt during this, needless to say. I don't ever want anybody hurt during any of the things that we talk about politically. I don't want any harm to come to anybody. It doesn't matter what side they're on. So I hope that that the two make it back safely. But even if they don't suffer the ultimate ignominy of coming back on a Dragon capsule, I think that the catastrophic failure of the Starliner in orbit is enough to probably sink that program. And one final thing at day 50. Space is a harsh environment. The capsule is not healthier on day 50 than it was on day 1. No. And it won't be any healthier on day 100 than it is on day 50. All of the systems in that vehicle are degrading on a daily basis. And they're going to, and so every day that they delay because they either don't want to admit that it's not safe or they're not confident in its return, is another day where that vehicle gets slightly more unsafe. It's getting more unsafe every day that it's up there. So I think that they ought to just bite the bullet and announce a plan to either get those people back now in that capsule if they deem it to be safe. That would not be a ride I would want to take.
Yeah, let me get more into that, because my hearts really go out to Wilmore, or excuse me, to Williams and Wilmore, who were supposed to be gone for 8 days. It's now been 50 days. I mean, they're both experienced astronauts. They have jobs to do on board the space station. They've got plenty of supplies and all that. But Scott, I want to read you a little bit about what's got to be foremost in their minds. And this is from one of the news reports. I can't remember which news agency to give credit to here. They said the astronauts who were at, pardon me, Mark Nappy, Vice President and Program Manager of the Commercial Crew Program at Boeing, said he wished the team had been clearer, his team at Boeing had been clearer in their messaging on how loose the timeline was from the beginning. He said, I think the only thing we do differently is we would not have been so emphatic about an 8-day mission. We kept saying 8-day minimum mission. I think we all knew it was going to go longer than that. It's my regret that we didn't just say we're going to stay up there until we get everything done we want to go do.
Oh, give me a break. Please.
On the off.
We meant to stay up there for 50 days. Oh, please.
Scott, on the off chance that this nappy guy from Boeing is being honest here. If you're one of those astronauts, does that have you wondering what the hell else they weren't honest about before they gave the go order for that launch?
And was there a different message given to the astronauts than given to the rest of us here on Earth? I mean, did they tell the astronauts, hey, this is 8 days-ish, that could float a little bit, maybe weeks, months, we're not clear on that, just hang loose, just enjoy yourself up there, make the best of it, and we'll see. He's making it sound like they planned to have the malfunctions that resulted in them getting stuck there. Like the stuff they had to do. Well, what they have to do is not stuff inside the space station. What they have to do is somehow fix the capsule that got them there. So that just doesn't make any sense at all. And by way of contrast, by the way, back on July 11th, SpaceX had a rare failure when their Falcon rocket was unable to light the Merlin engine for a second time on the stage that takes the Starlink satellites up into orbit because there was a leak that caused liquid oxygen to leak out, and that cooled some of the engine parts, which meant a really rough restart of that Merlin engine. As a consequence, they lost attitude control. They deployed the satellites. The satellites burned up on reentry to the Earth. So that was on the 11th of July. On the 27th, they say they'll be ready to relaunch.
Yeah, they've got a full weekend booked. They got their FAA approval either this morning or on Thursday, and they're good to go for 3 launches in the next 70 hours or something like that.
Yeah,
and that failure, by the way, provided no danger to anyone of any kind ever.
Yeah, and just the value of that pace that we've talked about many times, that launch cadence and the ability to rapidly assess problems and address problems. They know what it is. They described in detail what caused the problem. They know how to fix it, and they're ready to launch again. And so, just what a striking contrast that is with this cluster rocket situation that we have going up there. And then the other thing that I don't know why. This just doesn't seem like common sense. This just shows why I'm not in the space business, because to me, having a lifeboat plan is essential at all times. Like there should never be a situation where they don't have the backup plan. I mean, this is like a plot from some sort of space movie. It's like, of course they should be ready either to launch or to deploy something that's already at the space station to bring people back in case of problems with this super complex machinery, especially relatively untested vehicles like the Starliner. I just don't get it why there isn't always a backup plan.
Well, the space movie you're talking about is Space Titanic. I mean, they have lifeboats, but they only have lifeboats for 3 out of the 9 crew members.
No, there was Marooned, which was actually a pretty good sci-fi flick. I think it was an early Gene Hackman movie, if I remember correctly. I haven't seen it since I was a kid.
I mean, get Sandra Bullock up there and get them out.
Yeah, she can go to the Chinese station, pick up some stuff, then she can fly over to.
That's right.
Hey, here's the thing. Just one more thing that most people don't realize. The space station is not an orbital piggly wiggly. It's not like they have endless supplies on board where they can just we'll just go get some extra canned peas or something. When you have 2 extra people on board for 6 times the duration that you were expecting, you have supply issues, you have CO2 scrubber issues. You've got to resupply that station. Your entire supply chain and all of the missions that you've scheduled downstream to supply whatever the crew was before that, 7 people or whatever. Well, now you got to supply 9. You've had to supply 9 people for almost 2 months now. That has to come from somewhere. That changes all of their logistics. And for them to just poo-poo this thing as well, we always kind of wanted to stay up there as 50 days anyway. It's kind of like the same thing as the Secret Service director saying, "Oh, we didn't have any people up there because the roof was sloped." Don't consider us children. Just come on and just admit your mistakes and just tell us the truth.
I want to haul NASA and Boeing before a congressional panel and ask them how soon before we have to start worrying about cannibalism on the space station.
There is no cannibalism on board the International Space Station. When I say none, I mean there is a certain amount.
That's right.
And most of that is conserved to the
level of cannibalism. Well within
and virtually all
tolerances.
cannibalism is confined to the U.S. Navy.
So, and Bill, the one part you left out was I believe there are 5 available docking ports on board the space station, and those are like the most valuable parking spots ever made. But they are limited and they're scheduled a very long time in advance, and that's just another complicating factor. I'll tell you what you guys got me thinking about, though. When I first started writing about the story, I've been writing about it for years following Starliner, but this particular launch that first got delayed in the middle of May of this year, this has been going on for a while now, is that this version of the Starliner is not like the final version or whatever. The batteries for it were only rated for 45 days. They're now on day 50. NASA has extended that to 90 days, but as Bill said, space is harsh. If you were only rated for 45 days and you're stretching that out to 90, this is making me think a couple of things. One, even though NASA didn't have much to say at this particular press conference, I feel like it seemed like they felt like this was the press conference they had to give, not the one they wanted to give. And the one they're going to have to give a little later is the one where they say, yeah, SpaceX is going to have to bring these people home because these batteries are degrading and we still haven't been able to figure out how to make these thrusters safe. And the other is, and I hate to have to conclude this, but based on everything we've read, I think NASA sent those 2 astronauts up there with a pretty solid feeling in their guts that Starliner capsule wasn't coming home with astronauts on board, that they sent it up there on a one-way trip. And the fact that they would send up what Bill, I think, correctly called a non-man-rated capsule, come on, NASA. Come on, Boeing. You used to be so much better than this.
3 times.
Yeah. All right. That's your right angle on that. Brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. And hey, Wilmore Williams, please have a safe journey home aboard your SpaceX Uber.